The sky above the planet Draen was a swirl of dark clouds and red lightning. Cities that once touched the clouds now lay in ruins, their towers broken and blackened. Smoke rose from the ground, mixing with the storm, and the sound of distant explosions echoed across the jagged hills. Humans had come to this world to help the native alien species, the Lorin, defend their home from an invading force. Among the Lorin warriors was Kira, a tall, slender figure with shimmering green skin and sharp, alert eyes. Her movements were fast and precise, a perfect combination of grace and power, but today even her skill could not protect her from the chaos of battle. Elias, a human soldier, ran across the battlefield. He was not the strongest or the fastest, but he carried something more important: courage. His eyes scanned the fighting, looking for any signs of Lorin allies in danger. His heart beat fast as he ducked behind a fallen wall, watching Kira fight against a group of the invaders. Kira was skilled, but she was outnumbered. One of the enemy's energy blasts hit her shoulder, and she stumbled. Her spear clattered to the ground. She fell to one knee, gripping her side in pain. The other Lorin warriors were retreating, and humans were pulling back as well. Everyone seemed to have made a choice: survival first. Elias froze for a moment. His mind raced. If he followed the others, he would be safe. But Kira, she was still alive. She needed help. Without thinking twice, he ran toward her. The ground shook as another explosion rocked the ruins nearby. Dust and debris filled the air. Elias's boots slipped on broken stones, but he didn't stop. He reached Kira just as another Lorin warrior, a friend of hers, called out, "We can't stay, leave her." Elias shook his head. "I can't. She's alive, she needs me." Kira looked up, her green eyes wide and filled with pain. She tried to speak, but her voice came out as a weak whisper. Elias knelt beside her and carefully lifted her into his arms. Her body was surprisingly light, but every movement made her wince. "Easy," he said softly. "I've got you." The other humans hesitated. One of them, a soldier named Mara, shouted, "Elias, come on, we have to go. The enemy is everywhere." "I know," Elias replied, "but I can't leave her." Mara shook her head, her face tense with worry. "It's too dangerous." Elias didn't answer. He started moving again, carrying Kira through the broken streets. Smoke burned his eyes, and the sound of distant blasts made the ground tremble beneath him. But he did not falter. As they moved, Kira tried to speak again. Her words were broken and weak, but Elias listened carefully. She told him fragments of her language, simple words he could not understand yet. But her expression was clear. She was scared, but also trusting him. Elias smiled faintly, even as his heart pounded. "Don't worry," he said. "I won't let anything happen to you." The battlefield was chaotic. Fallen towers blocked their path. Fires spread across the streets. Strange machines moved through the ruins, searching for survivors. Elias found himself ducking and dodging constantly. He carried Kira like a hero from old stories, weaving between danger, never letting her fall. For hours they moved. The storm above them raged, lightning striking the broken buildings. Rain began to fall, hot and acidic, burning slightly on their skin. Elias shielded Kira with his body, moving as quickly as he could. He was tired, every muscle screaming for rest, but he refused to stop. At one point, Kira opened her eyes fully and looked at him. "Human?" she whispered, trying the word with difficulty. "Yes," Elias said, smiling gently. "I'm human. My name is Elias. I'm not leaving you behind." Kira's lips curled into a weak smile. For a moment, the chaos around them faded. In her eyes, there was a spark of hope. Even in this dark, ruined place, she felt safe because of one human who had chosen to care. Elias continued forward, navigating through the ruins. He found a small alley, partly shielded from the worst of the storm. He carefully laid Kira down behind a broken wall. She groaned but did not resist. Elias quickly checked her injuries. Her shoulder was badly burned, and there were cuts across, Her arms. "I need to keep you alive until we can find safety," Elias said. "Hold on, Kira. You're going to make it." Kira tried to speak again, but only managed a small nod. Her eyes followed him as he scavenged what he could from the ruins. Clean cloth for bandages, water from broken pipes, even some scraps of food. He worked quickly, knowing every second counted. Night began to fall, the storm still raging above. Elias built a small fire, careful to hide it from any enemies nearby. He sat beside Kira, keeping her warm and speaking to her softly. Even though she could not fully understand, she listened. Her trust in him grew stronger with every word. In that moment, Elias realized something important. Humans were not always the strongest. They did not have wings or glowing skin, or incredible strength like the Lauren. But they had something else: courage, empathy, the will to help others, even when it was dangerous. As the fire crackled, Kira closed her eyes, finally able to rest. Elias stayed awake, watching the dark ruins around them. He knew that the real challenge was still ahead, getting her to safety, but he also knew that he would not give up. Not ever. Because sometimes the difference between life and death was not power or speed, but the choice to stay and protect someone when everyone else had left. And Elias had made that choice. The night passed slowly, with the storm still beating down on the broken city. But within that darkness, a small spark of hope burned. One human had stayed. One human had chosen to carry a wounded alien warrior through a world filled with danger. And in that choice, humanity's true strength shone, brighter than any weapon, stronger than any storm. The ruins of Draen were quiet the next morning, but it was not the quiet of peace. It was the heavy silence that followed destruction, filled with smoke and the faint sound of falling stone. The air was thick, making every breath feel heavy. Elias opened his tired eyes. He had not slept much through the night. His body ached from carrying Kira, and his mind was restless, listening to every distant sound. But when he turned his head and saw the alien warrior still breathing, still alive, he felt strength return to him. Kira stirred slowly, her eyelids heavy. Her green eyes opened just a little and she looked at Elias. For a moment she seemed confused, but then she remembered. This human had not left her. He had carried her when everyone else had gone. "You safe?" Elias said gently. His words were simple, hoping she would understand. Kira tried to speak, but her voice was weak. Her language was strange, flowing with sounds Elias did not fully know. Yet her eyes carried meaning, and he understood enough. She was asking why. Elias smiled faintly. "Because you needed me. That's reason enough." He gave her water, helping her drink slowly. Then he tightened the bandage on her shoulder. It was not perfect, but it would keep her alive until he found better supplies. The sun was rising, its light breaking through the smoky sky. Elias knew they could not stay here. The enemy would surely search the ruins again. He needed to move Kira to a safer place. Carefully, he lifted her once more. Her body was light in his arms, but every step made his muscles burn. Still, he carried her without complaint. Each step was a promise to himself that he would not give up. The broken city stretched endlessly before them. Fallen towers leaned dangerously, and wide cracks cut across the streets. Strange alien plants grew in corners, where buildings had collapsed, their glowing vines twisting like snakes. Elias moved slowly, watching every shadow, listening to every sound. At times, Kira shifted weakly in his arms. She tried to say something, her words soft and unclear. Elias wished he could understand better, so he began speaking aloud, hoping she would hear his tone even if not his words. "My name is Elias," he said softly as he walked. "I come from Earth. My people are far away, but we came here to help. We may not have wings or glowing eyes like you, but we try our best. That's what humans do. We try, even when things seem impossible." Kira blinked slowly, listening. Though she did not understand every word, She could feel the meaning in his voice. Her hand moved slightly, brushing against his arm. It was weak, but it was a sign of trust. Hours passed as Elias carried her across the ruins. Sometimes he stopped, to rest, laying her gently on soft patches of moss or broken stone. He would search nearby for anything useful, a piece of cloth, a small container of water, or edible roots from alien plants. His knowledge was limited, but his will to learn kept him alive. Once, as he searched through a collapsed building, Kira tried to sit up. Her body shook with weakness, but she pointed to a shard of metal on the ground. Elias looked at her curiously, then picked it up. It was part of alien armor, shaped in a way he did not understand. Kira whispered something in her language, touching the shard. Elias guessed she meant it had value, perhaps for protection. He nodded, keeping it with them. "All right," he said. "If it helps, we'll carry it too." Their journey was slow, but step by step they moved further from the heart of the battle. The city gave way to rocky plains where alien trees with long silver leaves swayed in the wind. The air smelled fresher here, and for the first time in days Elias felt a small sense of hope. But danger was never far. Strange creatures moved in the distance, four-legged beasts with glowing eyes and long tails that crackled with sparks. They prowled through the ruins, searching for food. Elias crouched low, hiding with Kira behind a stone ridge. "Quiet," he whispered, though he knew she already understood the danger. He stayed perfectly still, holding her close as the beasts sniffed the air. His heart pounded, but he did not move. After long, tense minutes, the creatures finally walked away. Elias let out a breath of relief. Kira looked at him with wide eyes, clearly impressed. Humans, she thought, were not strong like her people, but they had a rare kind of patience and cleverness. Later, when they found another safe corner to rest, Elias gave her more water and food. She ate slowly, her strength returning little by little. As the day ended, Elias built another small fire, carefully hidden. He sat beside Kira, speaking again. "Back on Earth," he said softly, "we have stories. We tell them to give each other hope. There is one I remember about a traveler who carried a wounded friend across mountains. People told him to give up, but he never did. And because he never gave up, both of them survived." Kira listened, her eyes fixed on him. She did not understand every word, but she felt the warmth in his voice. Slowly, she repeated one word she recognized: "Friend." Elias's heart lifted. "Yes," he said with a smile. "Friend." That night, as stars appeared in the sky, Kira slept more peacefully than before. Elias stayed awake again, keeping watch. His body was tired, his back sore from carrying her all day, but his spirit was unbroken. He thought about the other soldiers who had left her. They had chosen safety, but he had chosen something different. He wondered what it said about humans, about himself, that he could not leave someone behind, even an alien warrior he barely knew. In his heart, Elias felt certain. This choice mattered. It was more than just saving one life. It was about showing what humanity could be. The night grew colder, and Elias pulled his cloak tighter around them both. Kira stirred in her sleep, resting against him. He looked at the stars and whispered, "We'll make it, I promise." And in that promise, in the quiet strength of one human carrying another through impossible odds, the true meaning of humanity shone. Not in power, not in numbers, but in compassion, in determination, and in the simple choice to never give up. The second night in the alien wilderness was calmer than the last. The sky above Drayan was no longer red with storm clouds. Instead, pale stars shimmered like silver dust across the darkness. Elias sat beside a small fire, his back resting against a stone. Kira lay nearby, her wounds wrapped with fresh cloth he had found during the day. Her breathing was stronger now. She still looked weak, but her eyes opened more often, and she watched Elias closely. For the first time since the battle, her face showed something other than pain, curiosity. Elias noticed her watching. He smiled. "You're awake again." Kira tilted her head slightly, listening. She could not understand all his words, but his tone was soft, patient, and safe. She whispered something in her own language, the sound flowing like music. "I wish I knew your words," Elias admitted, shaking his head. "But maybe we can learn." He pointed at himself. Elias. Then, he placed his hand gently on his chest. "Human." Kira blinked, studying him. Slowly she copied his gesture, pointing at him. "Elias." Elias laughed softly. "Yes, that's right." She hesitated, then touched her own chest. "Kira." "Kira," Elias repeated carefully. He gave a small nod of respect. "That's your name." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. For a moment the ruins around them seemed less broken, less heavy. They had taken their first step into understanding each other. The next day their slow journey continued. Elias carried Kira when the ground was rough, and when it was easier, she leaned on him as they walked together. She was still weak, but every hour her strength returned little by little. At midday they stopped near a fallen tree with wide roots. Elias gathered water from a stream nearby. He held the container to her lips and she drank slowly. When she finished, she said a single word in her language, then tapped her chest. Elias frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" he asked himself. Kira repeated the word again and made a gesture with her hand like giving and receiving. Elias realized she was trying to say thank you. He smiled. "You're welcome." Then he tapped his own chest and said, "Thank you." Kira tilted her head, then laughed softly for the first time. The sound surprised Elias. It was light, almost like the ringing of crystal. He laughed too, happy that even here, surrounded by danger, they could share something so simple. As they traveled, Elias tried teaching her simple human words. He pointed to things around them and spoke slowly. "Stone," he said, pointing to the ground. Kira repeated, "Stone." "Water," Elias said, pointing to the stream. "Wa, tear," Kira echoed, a little clumsy but clear. Her eyes lit up each time she understood. She began teaching him words from her own language as well. When she touched the sky and whispered, "Vera," Elias repeated carefully. "Vera." "Sky," he explained in return. Soon they were walking together, trading words, laughing at mistakes and smiling when they succeeded. For Elias, it was more than just learning words. It was proof that humans could connect with others even across worlds. For Kira, it was proof that humans carried patience and kindness as strong as any weapon. Later, they found shelter inside the hollow of a fallen tower. The walls were cracked, but it gave them shade from the harsh sun. Elias set down his small pack and looked at Kira. "You need rest," he said. Kira shook her head stubbornly. She tried to stand straighter, showing she was stronger than before. Elias couldn't help but chuckle. "You remind me of someone back home, always trying to be tougher than they are." Kira tilted her head. "Home?" she asked, repeating the word he used. Elias nodded. He pointed up at the stars. "Earth. That's my home, far away." Kira looked at the sky for a long time. Then, she touched her chest and said a word softly. "Lorna." Elias guessed it was the name of her world, or her people. "Lorna," he repeated, careful not to mispronounce. Kira gave a small nod of approval. For a while, they sat quietly, sharing the silence. Even without full words, they had found a way to speak with each other. That evening, Elias cooked a small meal with the little food he had left. He offered half to Kira. She hesitated, looking at the portion. Then she pushed a small piece back toward him. Elias shook his head. "You need it more than me." But Kira insisted, her eyes firm. She wanted to share. Elias finally accepted, realizing it was important to her. Humans often thought of survival as sharing burdens, and now he saw that her people valued the same. After they ate, Elias told a story. His voice was calm and his words simple. "On Earth we tell stories of travelers," he began, Once there was a man who crossed a desert. He had little food, little water, but he carried another on his back, someone who could not walk. People asked him why. He said, "Because I cannot leave them." And because he did not give up. They both survived. Kira listened closely, her eyes shining in the firelight. She did not know every word, but she felt the meaning. She touched her chest, and then pointed at him. "Friend," she said softly. Elias felt his heart warm. "Yes," he said. "Friend." Over the next few days, their bond grew stronger. Elias learned how to read her expressions, and Kira began to trust his judgment. When they faced obstacles, like a deep crack in the ground or sharp alien vines blocking their path, they worked together. Once, Elias used a fallen branch as a bridge so Kira could cross a gap safely. She watched in amazement, realizing humans could solve problems in creative ways instead of just relying on strength. Another time, Kira showed him how to avoid poisonous plants by watching for insects that stayed away from them. Elias admired her knowledge of the land. Together they were stronger than they were alone. Each night by the fire they traded more words. Soon Elias could understand simple phrases from her, and she could understand him in return. They no longer needed only gestures. They had begun building a real language between them. One night as they sat beneath the stars, Kira spoke slowly in broken human words. "Elias, you not leave." Elias looked at her surprised. Then he smiled. "No, I will never leave you." Kira's eyes softened. She whispered something in her own tongue, and though Elias could not understand, he felt the meaning. Gratitude, trust, and friendship. In that quiet moment, with the firelight flickering and the stars shining above, Elias realized something. Humanity's greatest strength was not its weapons or its armies. It was its heart. The simple, stubborn choice to care, to protect, to connect, even across worlds. And as Kira drifted to sleep beside the fire, Elias stayed awake, keeping watch as always. He whispered softly as if to himself, "We'll get through this together. Human and Lauren. Friend and friend." The night was long, but the bond they had begun to build would last far longer. The sun rose slowly over the plains of Drayan, painting the broken land in shades of gold and silver. For Elias, it was both beautiful and harsh. The light warmed his face, but it also revealed how much farther they still had to go. The safe valley Kira had mentioned in her weak words was far away, and the journey would not be easy. Elias helped Kira stand that morning. She was stronger than before, though she still leaned on him for support. Together, step by step, they began to move again. "Walk slow," Elias said gently, keeping his arm around her shoulders. Kira nodded. Her green eyes looked determined. She refused to give up even with pain still in her movements. Elias admired her strength, but he also knew she could not survive this alone. That thought gave him even more reason to keep going. The landscape changed as they left the ruined city behind. Great stone ridges rose from the earth, twisted into strange shapes. Some looked like giant claws reaching for the sky. The ground was cracked and uneven, and pools of glowing water shimmered in the low places. Elias did not trust the water. It glowed too brightly to be safe. At midday, the two of them rested beneath a tall silver tree. Its leaves gave shade, and its roots spread across the ground like giant ropes. Elias shared the last of their dried food with Kira. She accepted half, then pushed some back to him as she had before. "Share," she said in her broken human words. Elias smiled. "Yes, share." They ate slowly, sitting side by side. Even in silence, the bond between them grew stronger. The journey was filled with obstacles. At one point, they came to a wide crack in the earth. A deep canyon stretched before them too, wide to cross by walking. Elias frowned, studying the gap. "We need a way across," he muttered. Kira pointed to the side where fallen stone slabs leaned together, forming a narrow bridge. It looked dangerous, but it was their only choice. Elias tested the stones first, stepping carefully. The slab wobbled but held his weight. He turned back to Kira. "We can do this, slowly." Kira followed, leaning on him for balance. Step by step, they crossed the shaky bridge. The wind blew hard and loose dust rose into the air. Elias held, Kira close, guiding her. When they reached the other side safely, Kira let out a long breath. She looked at Elias and spoke a single word from her language. Her tone made its meaning clear: respect. Elias only smiled and nodded, though inside he felt proud. Humans might not have wings or claws, but they had steady hands and steady hearts. Later that day, they faced another trial. As they walked through a valley filled with tall grass, the ground began to shake. From the distance came a low rumble. Elias froze, his instincts warning him of danger. The grass parted, and a massive creature rose before them. It had 6 legs, a long body covered in armored scales and eyes that glowed like burning coals. Its head swung slowly, searching. Kira gasped softly. She whispered something in her tongue, and Elias understood only one word: hunter. Elias pulled Kira down behind a cluster of rocks. They crouched low, barely breathing. The creature moved closer, sniffing the air. Elias could feel its heavy steps through the ground. His mind raced. They could not outrun it. They needed another way. He looked around and spotted a cluster of glowing plants nearby. He remembered how Kira had taught him. Creatures avoided certain plants. Maybe this creature would too, he whispered to her. Trust me. Kira's eyes widened, but she nodded. Elias picked up a broken piece of stone and threw it into the glowing plants. The sound echoed. The hunter's head turned sharply toward the noise. It sniffed once, then backed away, as if the glowing plants carried a smell it feared. Slowly, the great beast turned and walked in another direction. Elias let out a long breath. Kira looked at him with amazement. Clever, she said in halting human words. Elias chuckled. Sometimes humans have to be. That evening, after the danger had passed, they found a small cave to rest in. Elias built a fire at the entrance, and Kira leaned against the stone wall watching him. You protect, she said slowly. Elias looked at her. Of course. That's what friends do. Kira was quiet for a while, her eyes thoughtful. Then she touched her chest and said something in her own language. Elias did not understand the words, but he understood the feeling behind them. It was more than gratitude. It was trust. The next day, rain began to fall, not the burning rain from before, but cool water that washed the dust from the air. Elias held his hands out, catching the drops. He laughed softly. Finally, clean water. Kira copied him, raising her hands. The rain soaked her silver hair and green skin, and she closed her eyes with a peaceful smile. For the first time, she looked less like a wounded warrior and more like someone at peace. They filled their small containers with water and kept moving. The rain made the journey harder, turning the ground into mud, but it also gave them new strength. Elias even joked, maybe the sky is on our side today. Kira tilted her head. Sky? Friend? Elias laughed. Maybe. By the time the sun set, they had covered more ground than ever before. Elias was exhausted, but he felt proud of how far they had come. Kira was walking more on her own now, though she still leaned on him at times. That night, as they sat by the fire, Elias told another story. On Earth we have explorers, he said. They crossed oceans with no map, only the stars to guide them. They were afraid, but they kept going because they wanted to discover, and because of that they found new lands. Kira listened, her eyes shining in the firelight. She whispered a word in her language, then repeated carefully in human words. Human, brave. Elias smiled, touched by her words. Sometimes, he said, but we're also stubborn. We don't give up easily. Kira nodded. Not give up. They both laughed softly. the firelight dancing between them. The journey was not over. The safe valley was still far ahead, and enemies could appear at any time. But as Elias watched Kira beside the fire, he felt certain of one thing. They were no longer just survivor and rescuer. They were partners now, two different beings walking the same path, sharing the same hope. And in that hope, Elias saw the true strength of humanity, not in weapons, not in armies, but in the choice to stand by another, no matter the cost. The night stretched long, but they faced it together, and together they would face whatever came next. The valley of safety was close now. Elias could feel it in his heart. Kira had spoken of it in broken words, a hidden place where her people sometimes gathered, where the ground was fertile and the air was safe to breathe. They had been walking for days, and finally the land began to change. The ruined plains gave way to rolling hills covered with tall silver grass. The wind carried the sound of flowing water. Birds with long wings circled high above. For the first time since the battle, Elias felt a real sense of hope. Kira was stronger now. She could walk on her own most of the time, though Elias still stayed close to help when she stumbled. Her wounds were healing and her spirit seemed brighter. Almost there, she said slowly, her human words improving with each day. Elias smiled. Yes, almost there. But as they moved through the silver grass, Elias could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. The air was too still. The birds above circled lower, uneasy. His soldier's instincts told him danger was near. He raised his hand, signaling Kira to stop. She obeyed, her eyes sharp as she scanned the hills. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then shadows moved in the grass. Figures rose all around them, enemies. They were tall, armored with glowing red marks across their bodies. Their weapons hummed with energy. Elias counted at least 6 of them, maybe more hidden in the grass. Kira gasped softly. She whispered a word in her language that Elias understood, only by her tone. Ambush. The leader of the enemy stepped forward. His voice was deep and sharp. Though Elias did not know the words, he could hear the meaning. Surrender. Kira's face tightened. She whispered to Elias in broken human words. They want me. Elias looked at her, then back at the circle of enemies. His heart pounded. He could run and maybe escape, but Kira could not fight in her condition. If he left her, she would be taken, or worse. No, Elias said firmly, shaking his head. Shaking. I won't leave you. The leader gave a sharp command and 2 soldiers stepped forward. Elias's mind raced. He had no heavy weapon, only a small blade and his cleverness. But humans had always survived by more than strength. He whispered quickly to Kira, "When I move, stay low, find cover." Kira wanted to argue, but she saw the determination in his eyes. Slowly she nodded. The enemies moved closer. Elias gripped the blade, his hand steady. He waited until they were just a few steps away. Then with sudden speed he grabbed a stone from the ground and threw it at one of the glowing plants nearby. The plant burst in a flash of light, releasing a sharp gas into the air. The enemies flinched, startled. In that moment, Elias pulled Kira down and rolled with her into the tall grass. "Go," he whispered urgently. They crawled quickly through the grass as the enemies shouted. Energy blasts cut through the air, burning the silver stalks around them. Elias kept his body between Kira and the danger, shielding her as best he could. Kira stumbled, but Elias pulled her up, guiding her toward a line of rocks ahead. They ducked behind the stones, breathing hard. The enemies regrouped, searching the grass. Elias looked at Kira. Her face was pale, but her eyes were fierce. "Together," she whispered. Elias nodded. Together. The battle was not about strength, it was about survival. Elias used the land around them to fight smart. He threw stones to create noise in different directions, confusing their pursuers. He led Kira through narrow paths where only one enemy could follow at a time. At one point, an enemy cornered them. The soldier raised his weapon ready to strike. Elias had no time to think. He leapt forward, pushing the weapon aside with his blade. The blast fired into the sky instead of Kyra. Elias kicked the soldier backward, then pulled Kyra with him, as they ran again. Why? Risk? Kyra asked breathlessly as they moved. Because that's what humans do, Elias said firmly. We protect. Her eyes shone with respect, even in the chaos. The chase continued through the hills until at last they reached a cliff overlooking a river. The water roared below, fast and dangerous. The enemies closed in from behind, blocking any way back. Elias stood tall, his body shielding Kyra. He knew he could not fight them all, but he also knew he could not give up. The leader stepped forward again, raising his weapon. His voice was commanding. Surrender. Elias shook his head. His voice was steady, even as his heart raced. No, I won't surrender her. If you want her, you'll have to go through me. Kyra's breath caught. She looked at Elias with wide eyes. In that moment, she saw the truth of humanity, not in power, not in numbers, but in one human's choice to stand for another. The enemies hesitated. Elias's courage seemed to surprise them. His stance was unshaken, his eyes filled with fire. And then before the leader could give the order, Kyra raised her voice. She shouted in her own language, her words filled with strength. The sound echoed across the cliffs. The enemies froze for a moment, uncertain. That was their chance. Elias grabbed Kyra's hand. Jump! Without hesitation, they leapt together into the river below. The water crashed around them, pulling them downstream with roaring force. Elias held onto Kyra tightly, refusing to let go. The current carried them far away from the cliff, far from the enemies who shouted above. When they finally reached calmer waters, Elias pulled Kyra to the shore. They lay on the riverbank, exhausted and soaked, but alive. Kyra turned her head toward him, her eyes wide with emotion. You save me, she whispered. Elias smiled weakly. Always. For a long moment, they simply lay there, breathing, hard, the stars beginning to appear overhead. The danger was not gone, but they had survived. And more than that, they had proven something powerful. Elias had shown through action what humanity truly meant. Not strength, not weapons, but the will to protect, even at great risk. Kyra reached out and clasped his hand. Her voice was soft, but her words were clear. Human hero. Elias shook his head. No, just human. But in Kyra's heart, she knew it was more than that. The river carried Elias and Kyra far from the ambush. The water's power was strong, but Elias never let go of her hand. He kept her close until the current slowed, and the two of them reached a calmer bend. With effort, Elias guided Kyra toward the bank, and together they pulled themselves out, coughing and shaking. The night sky above was filled with stars. The air was cold, but clean. They lay on the ground for a moment, listening to the quiet sound of the water. Kyra looked at Elias, her chest rising and falling with each heavy breath. Her voice was weak but clear. We live. Elias nodded, exhausted but determined. Yes, we live. For a long while, neither of them spoke. They simply rested side by side, staring at the stars. In those silent moments, Elias felt something change. The fear of the past days was still there, but it no longer ruled him. Hope was stronger now. Morning came slowly. The sun rose, casting golden light on the land around them. The hills glowed bright and the silver grass shimmered. Birds sang again, filling the air with life. Kyra pushed herself to sit up. She was still weak, but her eyes carried new strength. Valley. Close, she said, pointing beyond the hills. Elias helped her stand. Then we'll make it. Together. They walked again, step by step through the rolling land. The memory of the ambush stayed with them, but Elias knew the enemies would keep searching. They had to reach safety soon. Along the way, Elias gathered food, roots, berries, and clean water. He made sure Kyra ate first, always watching over her. Kira noticed this and said softly, "Human heart, strong." Elias smiled faintly. "Maybe. But I think it's just what anyone should do." Kira shook her head gently. "Not anyone. Human special." Her words stayed with him as they climbed the last hill. At the top, they saw it, the valley. It spread out below them, wide and green, filled with tall trees and shining rivers. Strange flowers bloomed in bright colors, and large creatures grazed peacefully in the fields. In the distance, small stone shelters stood, shaped carefully by hands. Kira's eyes filled with tears. "Home," she whispered. Elias felt relief flood through him. But as they walked down into the valley, he also felt nervous. What would her people think of him, a human carrying their wounded warrior? Would they see him as friend or threat? When they reached the valley floor, shapes appeared between the trees. Tall figures with glowing patterns on their skin stepped out carefully, their weapons ready. These were Kira's people. They spoke quickly in their own language. Elias could not understand the words, but he could see their guarded eyes. They were ready to fight if needed. Kira raised her hand weakly and called out. Her voice carried across the valley. The warriors froze, then hurried toward her. They caught her as she stumbled, supporting her with care. Their eyes softened when they saw her wounds, but soon their gaze shifted to Elias. Elias stood still, meeting their eyes calmly. He did not raise a weapon or make a threat. He only waited. Kira pointed to him and spoke in her language. Though Elias did not understand, he knew she was telling them what had happened. She spoke of the battle, the ambush, the river, and of how the human had not left her side. The warriors looked at him differently now. Their eyes held less suspicion, more curiosity. One of them, older and taller, stepped forward. He spoke slowly in broken human words. "You save her?" Elias nodded firmly. "Yes." The elder looked at Kira. She nodded in return, her eyes shining with trust. At last, the elder gave a small bow of respect. "Human friend." Elias let out a breath he had been holding. For the first time, he felt safe. The days that followed were peaceful. Elias was given food and shelter in the valley. The alien healers tended to Kira's wounds with care, and soon her strength returned fully. She could walk tall again, her head high, her spirit unbroken. Often she spoke to her people about Elias. At night, by the fires, she told the story, in her own tongue, how everyone else had left her on the battlefield but one human had stayed, how he carried her, healed her, protected her, and refused to surrender her even when danger closed in. The others listened with wide eyes. For many of them, humans were only rumors, strange and weak creatures from far away. But now, through Kira's voice, they began to see something different. Elias did not boast, and he did not try to act as a hero. He simply lived among them quietly, helping when he could, building shelters, gathering food, teaching small tricks of survival. The aliens watched him, and slowly they began to smile at his efforts. One evening, Kira approached him by the river. Her wounds had healed and her movements were strong again. She looked at him with deep respect. "You change everything," she said softly. Elias tilted his head. "How?" "Before, my people see humans as weak. Now, they see strong heart, courage, loyalty. Human not just survive, human inspire." Elias felt warmth in his chest. He had not set out to inspire anyone. He had only chosen to do what he thought was right. But maybe that was what made it powerful. Kira placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "You not just save me. You give hope." In the weeks that followed, word spread among her people. More travelers came to the valley, bringing news of the world outside. They spoke of danger, but also of change. The story of the human who carried the wounded warrior was told again and again, passed from one voice to another. It became more than a story. It became a symbol. The aliens began to see humans not as small or weak, but as beings of willpower and spirit. They realized that strength was not only in weapons or numbers, but in choices. The choice to protect, the choice to remain, the choice to carry another even when it seemed impossible. And so, a new bond formed between the two peoples. Not one of fear, but of respect. On the last night before the stars aligned, an event Kira's people celebrated, Elias stood with her on a high hill overlooking the valley. The sky was filled with countless lights, brighter than he had ever seen. Kira looked at him with a quiet smile. Elias, human, you are not forgotten. Story live. Forever. Elias shook his head, smiling faintly. I don't want to be remembered as a story. I just want to know you're safe. Kira's eyes softened. Safe, because humans stayed. They stood together in silence, the stars glowing above them. The valley was calm, the world at peace. For now. Elias knew there would be more struggles ahead for both humans and aliens. But he also knew something important. One act of courage could change the way two species saw each other. One choice could carry not only a wounded warrior but also the weight of hope for the future. And so the human and the alien warrior looked to the stars, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as allies, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring.